Hello everybody, my name is Logan, and today we're going to be taking a look at Frost Mage in patch 7.2.5. Tomb of Sargeras has been out for just a number of weeks now. Mythic killed Jaden, I think 2 weeks ago, so that's about where we're at in the patch cycle. And so Frost Mage is currently the most popular of the mage specs. And a little background of myself really quick. In Emerald Nightmare, the beginning of Emerald Nightmare, just like everybody and their brother, I was playing Fire. So I was maining Fire for 2 months probably. But partway through that, I switched to Arcane and finished out the rest of the tier and was very successful as Arcane. Halfway through the Nighthold though, Frost received some under the hood kind of changes, and it started to make it really good, and Arcane was just, it struggled in the Nighthold, for lack of a better way to put it. But so now I've been playing Frost since about a month into Nighthold's release, and I actually enjoy Frost the most out of all three of the specs right now. And because of that, I've been successful with Frost. So this guide hopefully will show you, no matter who you are, if you're brand new, maybe picking the spec up as an alt, or starting a level from level 1, or whatever your reason. Maybe you're even an experienced player and you're looking to hopefully pick up some new tidbits of information, and that would be great as well. But I'm going to try and hit briefly on a lot of different topics, so this could be a little bit lengthy, but we'll see how it goes. So let's look at what Frost Mage is all about. So Frost Mage in general, you're looking for procs. You're looking for procs, and you're looking to make your spells crit the target. And you make your spells crit the target through a passive that we'll look at in 1 second. But first I want to look at your three main abilities. We have Frostbolt, which is your main filler ability, and this is the ability you're going to be casting most often, and you're looking for this spell to give you some procs. And those procs are Fingers of Frost and Brain Freeze. And so your other ability is called Ice Lance, and you're going to be consuming your proc of Fingers of Frost with Ice Lance. Flurry, same deal. Flurry is a proc of that you get from Brain Freeze. Flurry is a hard casted spell, but you should never ever hard cast Flurry. You just don't do that. So Brain Freeze makes it instant cast. Ice Lance is instant cast already, by the way. But so. Yeah, Brain Freeze makes Flurry instant cast, makes it do a little bit more damage, and it applies a debuff to the target. Now, before we talk about that debuff, let's talk about this whole shattering thing, or when their targets are frozen. So we have this passive called Shatter, and Shatter is the entire crux of what makes Frost Mages work. So it multiplies your critical strike chance of spells against frozen targets by 1.5, and adds an additional 50% critical strike chance. So, to do the math for the thorough-minded of us, right now my character has 33.24% crit chance. So if we multiply that times 1.5, that gives us 49.86. If we add 50 to 49.86, that gives us 99.86% chance to crit against a frozen target. So if I walked up to this target, now this is a rating dummy, I guess I could freeze one of these, but if I walked up to this target and hit Frost Nova and froze it in place, and then cast my Ice Lance, which is, according to my tooltip, going to do roughly 108k damage, because it's frozen, it would do triple that damage, and then it would add the crit chance to it, because it's a guaranteed crit. Well, almost guaranteed. There's what, 0.14% chance it's not going to crit. So that's the idea. It's a very big difference, a non-crit Ice Lance versus one that shatters off of the target. And it's important to know the difference between a crit Ice Lance and one that shatters, because if this just crits, I'm just going to cast a pile of Ice Lances here, and we'll see what happens. So Ice Lance, you can see right there, my crits were doing 320, which is roughly in line with about where they should. Now it's a little bit higher than the 200%, but that's just because of some multipliers and things like that. So that's the general idea with Shatter. Now you can apply, there's a debuff that is applied through Flurry when Brain Freeze procs. So Flurry fires off 3 bolts, and each of those little bolts applies a very short duration debuff to the target that makes all of your spells against that target shatter, as if the target were frozen. So you got 1, 2, 3 bolts, and each of them adds their short little duration. So you can do some kind of cool little things. And there's they're kind of like, think of them as like spell combos. So because of the flight times of the projectile, you can actually cast, so if you have a Brain Freeze proc, you can cast Frostbolt, immediately cast your Flurry proc, and then follow it up immediately with an Ice Lance. So that would look something like this. Let me see if I can get a Brain Freeze proc here. Oh, so there we got one. There I just got rid of my Fingers of Frost proc. Now I'm going to cast Frostbolt, Flurry, Ice Lance. And there's the debuff. And that's the general idea. And the reason you do that is because, as I already said, the flight times and the way that the 3 bolts hit the target from Flurry, you can shatter your Frostbolt and then shatter your Ice Lance, all because of that Flurry proc. Now, the Fingers of Frost proc, which I just sort of skimmed over, what it does is it gives you 2 charges or 3 charges once your artifact weapon's filled out. So essentially 3 charges in this day and age. 3 charges of Ice Lance that essentially just make your Ice Lances shatter the target no matter what. It's that simple. You don't need to do anything special with those. Those are guaranteed shatter. Now you can use the Fingers of Frost, and if your crit is too low, below the soft cap of 33.34%, you can sometimes throw those out and they won't crit, and that's a sad time. So for that reason, spoiler alert before we get to stats, crit is very, very important to get as close as you can to 33.34%. So that's the general idea there. Back to some rotational stuff though. So we just talked about Frostbolt, Flurry, Ice Lance combo when we have a Brain Freeze proc. Our artifact ability, Ebon Bolt, does a pretty substantial amount of damage, but it also is generates a guaranteed proc of Brain Freeze. So you can cast and do the exact same thing. And because of the way the game reads procs, you can actually cast with no procs right now active. I can cast Ebon Bolt, cast Flurry that I know it's going to generate, and then shatter my Ice Lance. This is the same exact thing, just with Ebon Bolt instead of Frostbolt. So Ebon Bolt, now I'm casting off the Brain Freeze, the Flurry proc, and then Ice Lance, and shattering all of them. And that guarantees your Ebon Bolt to crit, because it's arriving at the target after the first bolt from Flurry. So again, to reiterate, the very first bolt from Flurry gets to the target extremely fast. It's a very small amount of time, compared to the slow time it takes for Ebon Bolt and Frostbolt to get there. Pretty simple concept. You got that 3-button rotation that you're kind of using and abusing your Brain Freeze procs. If you're taking Glacial Spike, which is a level 100 talent, we'll talk about talents in a little bit here. Taking Glacial Spike, the same thing holds true. Glacial Spike, whenever you cast it, if you have a Brain Freeze proc ready to rock and roll, you can cast Glacial Spike, immediately follow it up by your Flurry proc, and then shatter your Glacial Spike, and then also toss in another Ice Lance and shatter that as well. And that's actually one reason that Glacial Spike has become very competitive in this current raid tier, is because you can now shatter Glacial Spike with Flurry that you could not previously do last patch. So let's look at our cooldowns now though. So we've got our 3 main abilities and our artifact weapon. Our cooldowns are Frozen Orb and Icy Veins. Frozen Orb, 1 minute cooldown, and it fires out an orb, and whenever it gets to the target, it guarantees you 1 proc of Fingers of Frost. So I'm tracking stuff here, but up here, so here's our Fingers of Frost procs. And you can see I've got 3 of them. Frozen Orb has a very high chance to generate Fingers of Frost procs, and that is its main use. It does metacore AoE damage because it does, splash damage around it. But its main reason to use is for the Ice Lance procs. Simple as that. The cooldown of Frozen Orb can be reduced by your AoE ability, Blizzard. So when you cast Blizzard, which we can see here, and I have a cursor macros so I don't have to target the ground. So every time Blizzard ticks on the target, it reduces the cooldown on Frozen Orb by 1/2 of a second. So that means if you're in a scenario where your Blizzard's going to hit more than one target, you do want to be casting Blizzard so that you're reducing the cooldown on Frozen Orb. Two is in a matter of opinion, I think, in my opinion, but 3 targets, absolutely, definitely be casting Blizzard on 3 targets to reduce the cooldown on Frozen Orb. More Frozen Orbs throughout a fight means more Ice Lances, and Ice Lances are your money ticket to doing a lot of damage as Frost. Moving on, we have Icy Veins. Icy Veins is our main cooldown. Icy Veins is a 20-second duration haste buff that gives us 30% haste. It also, because of our 1 artifact golden trait, is a 20% damage increase to Frost spells, which is everything. So you've got 20 seconds of 30% haste and 20% increased damage. And this also has a cooldown reduction through the artifact weapon, and that's called Frozen Veins. Every time your Frost Bolt crits the target, reduces the cooldown by 2 seconds. Simple enough. So let's talk about the other talent real quick. And again, we're going to come back and go through the whole talent tree, but these two are crucial to understanding the gist of the whole thing. Thermal Void increases duration of Icy Veins by 10 seconds, so it goes from 20 to 30. And then every time your Ice Lance hits a frozen target, or when it shatters, you increase the remaining duration on Icy Veins by 1 second. Now, a lot of us will probably remember that in Nighthold, mages were having extreme uptime on Icy Veins. And I'm talking in the range of like 80 to 100% of the entire boss fight duration. And I did it. I was one of those people who was able to do that on particular fights with some good RNG and that kind of stuff. That doesn't happen anymore. They nerfed Thermal Void going into Tomb of Sargeras, which was a justifiable nerf. That was not the way. Blizzard doesn't want you to do that, and so I'm okay with that. But Thermal Void still seems to be currently better than Glacial Spike. Some people are having better luck with Glacial Spike. I'm not one of those people, so I prefer Thermal Void. So those are your main cooldowns. We've got Icy Veins and Frozen Orb. You want to be using these two together all the time. But because of the cooldown differences, you're going to be casting at least 1 Frozen Orb without Icy Veins. So you're going to cast Frozen Orb, Icy Veins, then you're going to do your thing, and then a minute later you're going to cast Frozen Orb again. When that comes back around the next time, you're probably going to want to delay your 3rd Frozen Orb so that it lines up with Icy Veins. Now, if there's some weird things going on and they're like 40 seconds apart, then just deal with it. I don't know if I would want to delay it that long, depending on some circumstances. That's one of those things you'd have to figure out on the fly and decide for yourself. Most of the time, that'll only happen if you're casting a lot of Blizzards during the fight, or if you're getting really good or really bad RNG with your Frostbolt crits and the cooldown reduction on Icy Veins. So let's look at some talents now, the rest of the talents instead of just our 2 level 100 talents. So first we have Ray of Frost. Ray of Frost is a 10-second channel that increases in its damage every time it ticks the longer you channel it. So it's going to do its maximum damage at 10 seconds. Additionally, the damage that it does drastically scales with haste. So haste is Ray of Frost's best friend. Now, currently, Ray of Frost is not the most viable thing in the world, mostly because, I mean, how many raid bosses or dungeon bosses can you stand perfectly still for 10 seconds and do all your damage? It's just not the most likely thing in the world. It is good. It is a niche in the fact that it does extremely high amount of damage. So if you're on a raid progression fight and there's a high priority ad with a lot of health, and you can ensure that you'll be standing still, Ray of Frost could be viable in that situation. But most of the time, not so much. Bone Chilling. All of your abilities that would slow the target, so your Frostbolt and Flurry apply a stack of Bone Chilling to the target. Each one of those stacks is a 0.5% damage boost to all of your damage. Stacks up to 12 times, so it's essentially a 6% damage buff. But you'll notice I'm taking Lonely Winter, and I have no pet around me. Frost usually has a water elemental that flies or walks around with it and casts spells and all that kind of good stuff. Lonely Winter gets rid of your pet and buffs your damage to compensate for not having a pet. And at higher gear levels, Lonely Winter seems to overtake Bone Chilling pretty consistently among most people. But if you're still getting your stuff together, you're still low item level, Bone Chilling is perfectly fine to take. They're pretty close, but Lonely Winter outscales it. Level 30, we have Shimmer and Ice Flows are our main two choices. Glacial Installation is a defensive, and it's kind of weird in my opinion. But Shimmer replaces Blink, reduces the cooldown, and gives you 2 charges of Blink. Now, the cool thing about Shimmer is that it's castable while you're already casting a spell. Now, I just use both my charges. I can't demonstrate that right this second, but so what that means is you can be casting a spell. So I'm going to start casting Frostbolt, and Shimmer in between, it does not cancel your cast. And you can actually do some cool things too. Like, I'm going to go stand behind the target here, and as soon as my Shimmer comes back up, I'm going to begin casting this, and if I'm fast enough while talking to you guys, I'll be able to be casting Frostbolt, blink or Shimmer behind the target, and turn my body around before the spell goes off and not cancel anything. So, Frostbolt, Shimmer, turn around, still makes it. Very, very, very good. Ice Flows used to be the go-to for all mage specs, but since they put Shimmer and Ice Flows on the same talent row, those of us that got very used to Shimmer and got good at movement with it, you just can't go back to Blink after getting used to Shimmer. Ice Flows is still okay, though. If that's what you prefer, then knock yourself out. Level 45, we have some DPS boosts now. Mirror Images, generally not used for Frost Mages. This would be a similar, niche thing, similar to Ray of Frost. Mirror Images just does not do the greatest for Frost, just because of some scaling things. But it can be a cooldown, an additional cooldown that you use to nuke a priority target. Rune of Power, not the best for Frost either. Rune of Power could be good with Ray of Frost, and well, you definitely would want Rune of Power with Ray of Frost. Those two kind of go hand in hand. But other than that, Rune of Power, not Frost's best friend, because we're taking Incanter's Flow. And Incanter's Flow is just a constant percent damage multiplier that fluctuates on at a sinusoidal rate from 1 stack to 5 stacks at 4% increased damage per stack. Frost's damage is much more spread out compared to most other DPS specs. It's not as much of a glass cannon as say Arcane Mages, for example, where they're going to burst for several million damage in the first 15 seconds and then drop like a rock until their cooldowns are back up. So we're taking Incanter's Flow, which is fine with me because that gives us a lot more movement. We're not locked down to a Rune of Power. So then moving on to level 60, we have Ice Nova, Frozen Touch, and Splitting Ice. Ice Nova, not the most used thing in PvE. PvP, you can use it. It's more used there, I believe. I'm by no means a PvP expert, so don't anybody murder me out there who is. But Frozen Touch is generally going to be your go-to single target talent. Just an increased chance to generate Fingers of Frost procs. But then we have Splitting Ice. Splitting Ice makes your Ice Lance hit an additional target. Makes your priority target take 5% more damage from your Ice Lance. But then a nearby target also gets cleaved by Ice Lance for 80% of your Ice Lance damage. This is very, very, very strong. And in my personal opinion, if there is a phase in a fight where you're going to be cleaving and get not even that many, to be honest, shattering Fingers of Frost shattered Ice Lances on that secondary target, Splitting Ice outpaces Frozen Touch pretty quickly. But for pure single target, Frozen Touch is the way to go. Level 75, doesn't matter. Take whatever you want. Level 90, we have Frost Bomb, Unstable Magic, and Arctic Gale. Frost Bomb is interesting, but it's very high maintenance. So you would apply Frost Bomb to the target, and it doesn't do anything by itself. But whenever you shatter an Ice Lance onto a target with Frost Bomb, it then erupts and does damage. And it does actually pretty good single target damage, and also AoE damage. but it's very high maintenance, so it reduces the number, because this has a cast time and you have to spend global cooldowns maintaining it, reduces the number of frost bolts that you cast throughout the fight. So generally, unstable magic is your go-to. Completely passive, click it on and forget about it. It just kind of does its thing. Arctic Gale increases the damage and radius of blizzard. So this is going to be your Mythic Plus talent in most situations. And similarly, if there's a raid boss, you're going to be casting blizzard on a semi-frequent basis. And then we've already talked about Thermal Void and Glacial Spike. Glacial Spike, though, what I didn't touch on earlier was how it works. So your mastery that makes you generate icicles, which we'll talk about stats as soon as we're done here. Every time you have 5 icicles, which you generate from Frostbolt, so 1 Frostbolt, 1 icicle, 2 Frostbolts, 2 icicles, etc. When you hit 5 icicles, you can then consume those icicles and turn it into a big Glacial Spike. And that Glacial Spike then hits the target for a pile of damage. And this also benefits from splitting ice, by the way. So if there's 2 targets, Glacial Spike will hit both of them. And then we have Comet Storm. Comet Storm is relatively weak. Technically is the best for mass AoE, though. So if there's a low-level Mythic Plus and your tank is pulling the entire Maw of Souls in 3 pulls, especially a Death Knight, actually, who can pull all of the mobs in, Comet Storm is actually pretty decent. It's just a very small radius, which is the really sucky part about it, in my opinion. But so those are your talents. For pure single target, you'll be looking right about what I have right here: Lonely Winter, Shimmer, Enchantress Flow, Frozen Touch, Unstable Magic, and Thermal Void. For AoE, still going to be taking Lonely Winter, Shimmer, and Enchantress Flow, but you'll be taking Splitting Ice and Arctic Gale. And then after that, for mass AoE, generally you're still going to be taking Thermal Void. If you love Glacial Spike, or if your gear is better for Glacial Spike, then go for it. Comet Storm, probably not the best thing to take, because it's just so underwhelming. But so I promised we'll talk about stats next, so let's do that. So I mentioned mastery. We'll start there. Mastery, TLDR, is total garbage for Frost Mages, unless you're taking Glacial Spike. It does become better with Glacial Spike, but most of the time mastery is pretty crappy. So your mastery, percent of your mastery, whenever your Frostbolt goes out and hits the target, that percentage is then stored inside of that icicle. So let's just say, for the sake of easy math, I have 50% mastery. If I cast a Frostbolt and it goes out to the target and it hits the target for 300,000 damage, 50% of that 300,000, so 150,000, is stored as an icicle. Then whenever I reach 5 icicles and I cast another Frostbolt, instead of gaining a 6th icicle, one of the icicles will fly off and go hit the target. Or if you cast Ice Lance immediately triggers that all of your icicles go to the target. Absolutely zero maintenance, don't worry about it whatsoever, unless you're playing Glacial Spike. But that's a different story, different topic. So then we have Critical Strike. We mentioned that Critical Strike has is super important because of Shatter. The soft haste cap or soft crit cap is 33.34%. Now it's very important to get very close to that. The value of crit, though, however, drops the closer you get to that soft cap. But keep in mind, it doesn't go to 0 after you reach that point. There's other reasons to continue getting more crit. It's just that crit becomes less valuable after that point. So it's okay to have 35 or 36% crit, but generally, if you can, you want to try and put those extra stats elsewhere. Then we have Haste. Haste does the same thing it always does, increases your cast speed and lowers your global cooldown. Haste is very good for Frost, actually, because it reduces the cast time of Frostbolt, and which gives you more Frostbolts throughout the course of a fight. And more Frostbolts equals a higher chance at generating procs. More procs equal more flurries and more Ice Lances, which are more damage. Versatility, same old. Mastery, already talked about. And then tertiaries, which don't matter. So those are your stats. Generally, and I say generally because stats are very, very just goofy in Legion, as most of us are aware. But in general, your stats that you want to look for is critical strike, up to 33.34% chance, or close to there, and then intellect, and then haste, versatility are actually, at least for me currently, versatility and haste are very close in value, but generally I would recommend haste first, and then versatility, and then mastery. So again, that's crit to the soft cap, intellect, haste, versatility, mastery. Alright, so those are our basics to making your Frost Mage work. But before we end the video, I'd like to talk about some slightly more advanced things, and the first of which are our artifact talents and relics. As far as relics that you want to shoot for, there's 4 that are very strong and pretty much your go-to relics if possible. But the caveat to that is it's not like some specs where it's like, oh god, I need this relic and it better be at least, I need that relic, but it's so important that other stuff's just invaluable no matter how many item levels I gained out of that. I know I stuttered through my words there. I hope you understood what I mean. There's nothing that's crazy powerful is what it boils down to, is what I was trying to say. So generally, item level is most important for relics. However, Let It Go, which is Ice Lance crit damage, Frozen Veins, which is the one that reduces the cooldown on your Icy Veins from your Frostbolt crits, and then Clarity of Thought and Ice Age. Clarity of Thought, increased chance for brain freezes, and Ice Age, increased damage by Flurry. Those are your 4 main ones that you want to look for in terms of relics for your weapon. But other than that, our golden traits, this one here is really the only super duper important one to worry about. It's the 20% damage thing. And then we've got just extra bonus damage, icicles. This one here, however, chain reaction. So whenever your Frostbolt crits the target, you gain a buff called chain reaction. And it stacks up to 3 times. Each one of those stacks is worth 10% damage to your Ice Lances. So that's 30% increased Ice Lance damage if you're at 3 stacks. So that, between thinking about chain reaction and then also Frozen Veins, where you're where your Frostbolts critting are a big deal, that brings me to a more advanced thing where you don't want to stop casting Frostbolts. Just because you have a proc of Fingers of Frost doesn't mean you have to press it immediately. Generally, you want to wait until, if you can, you want to wait until you have high stacks of Chain Reaction or a high stack of Enchanter's Flow, because you can hold 3. Now that means don't hit 3 and just kind of sit there hanging out and chilling with it, and no pun intended with the chilling, but you don't want to waste charges. That's the entire point of most of this spec, is getting everything out, making your all of your spells crit and shatter the target, and don't waste procs. Now, it's impossible to have 100% resource usage just because of the way things work. But going back to these traits, it's important to keep kind of weaving in. Think of it as weaving in Frostbolts between your instant cast procs. And then our new stuff, new traits, these are pretty boring. And then we have Freezing Rain. So whenever you cast Frozen Orb, while it's active, you can instant cast Blizzard. So you'll get a buff called Freezing Rain whenever you cast Frozen Orb, and your Blizzard is instant. So normally, like, we have a... I'm lagging out, aren't I? Oh, man. Sure would appear that way. Alright, hang on. Alright, folks. We're back. Sorry about the disconnect. But, so... what I was talking about, I believe, were the new traits from your artifact weapon. So Freezing Rain, which that's what I was talking about. So we were talking about Blizzard and Freezing Rain. So Blizzard normally has this cast time, but if we cast Frozen Orb, the cast time goes away while Frozen Orb is active. So you'll gain a buff whenever you cast Freezing Rain, or whenever you cast Frozen Orb, called Freezing Rain, and then you can instant cast Blizzard through there. Blizzard still has a cooldown, but it's instant cast. So for example, I cast Frozen Orb, Blizzard is instant cast. Boom. Now I'm tracking the Freezing Rain buff right here, and so as soon as the Blizzard comes back off cooldown, I can still cast Blizzard immediately inside of that window. So you'll get 2 blizzards per frozen orb. So, and my recommendation is cast blizzard immediately with frozen orb, and then wait until it's about to expire. Because the damage buff, as far as I know, doesn't from blizzard. You can't put 2 blizzards on top of each other. And so blizzard lasts the same amount of time no matter what, but its cooldown is reduced by haste, which I know doesn't make any sense, but that's just the way it works. So you could potentially overwrite one blizzard with another one. So that's why I just say cast blizzard immediately after frozen orb, and then cast it again before freezing rain ends, so you make sure you get your 2 instant cast ones in there. Now, because of the cooldown reduction on frozen orb, a lot of people want to try and cast blizzard with freezing rain on a single target to reduce the cooldown on frozen orb, and they especially want to do that when they're taking thermal void, because frozen orb generates so many ice lance procs, makes thermal void better. Don't do that. It is a DPS loss to be casting blizzard on a single target. The reason being is because the time, even just the 2 instant cast GCDs, that's less time that you could have been casting Frostbolt, and the potential for the procs of Frostbolt outweigh the few short, very small number of seconds that you would be taking off the cooldown of frozen orb. So 2 targets or more, use blizzard. 1 target, do not use blizzard, and that's just the way that works. So looking at some more stuff and legendaries, the quote-unquote elephant in the room for all of Legion. One nice thing about Frost, there is no one particular legendary that you need for this class to work. Similarly, on the opposite end of that stick, arcane mages and fire mages, along with a lot of other specs in the game, need a legendary to function correctly. You need the arcane mage kilt. You need the pants for that to work. Not the case with Frost. Definitely there are some legendaries that are a lot better than others, and currently the best simming legendaries are the Bracers and the Shard of the Exodar. But again, like I said, there is nothing that's absolutely well, there's just stuff that's bad. The boots, or no one wants the frickin' boots. But it's okay. You'll be okay. Just keep playing it. You'll do fine. You're not going to be just completely neutered by the fact that you don't have a particular legendary. So moving on to some things to track. I already talked about chain reaction, but I'm going to open up Tell Me When, because that's what I use to track stuff. And I know, don't be alarmed by the cluster of stuff here. It's not as messy as it may seem during combat. So I track Incanter's Flow, and I track chain reaction. These 2 things are what I use when I'm really playing at my best to try and min-max the damage that my Ice Lances do. And that's for the same reason that I said about earlier. You can hold up to 3 charges, as long as you're not going to lose a charge due to waiting too long and it just expires, or reaching 3 charges and wasting other potential procs. You can hold on to stuff. So wait until you're at a higher stack of Incanter's Flow, or wait until you're at 3 stacks of Chain Reaction, and then fire your Ice Lances off. So this is a not important, super important thing to do, but if you're really trying to push DPS and, parse well and all that kind of good stuff, and you're really min-maxing, I definitely recommend tracking these 2 things and utilizing them. Other thing is Fingers of Frost. Blizzard's default UI shows 1 and it shows 2 charges of Fingers of Frost. It does not show the 3rd. So you need some way to track how many charges you have. So that way you know when you have 3 and when you don't. There are other add-ons to do the same thing, but I just use Tell Me When just to keep everything the same for me. I also track the Brain Freeze proc, the buff that gives you Brain Freeze. The only reason I do that is because in some cases where you're just getting amazing procs on like AoE types of things from Frozen Orb, sometimes you'll have a Brain Freeze proc and you're sitting on it to try and get rid of all of your Ice Lances first, all of your Fingers of Frost procs first. You still don't want to waste your Brain Freeze because it does a pile of damage. So I kind of keep track of that just to make sure I know what the cooldown is. And then I'll track Freezing Rain. And this thing here tracks the cooldown of Ebon Bolt and other mage artifact weapons. And then this is are the cooldowns for all of the mage specs, Icy Veins in this case. So that tracks the cooldown and it tracks the buffs that I can watch it. So let's let's conclude this baby by looking at a basic like rotation. So I'm going to try and do my best here to talk through this, and I'll probably make a lot of mistakes because, as my mother always tries to tell me, I can't multitask worth a piss. But so anyways, here we go. I'm going to put my fake flask up. So generally, Potion of Prolonged Power, and what I do, especially with the two-piece from Tomb of Sargeras, where your critical strike damage is doing a lot more, I try to make sure I shatter Ebon Bolt after I gain that buff, so after I cast Frozen Orb. So my opening rotation generally consists of pre-pot during the countdown, and then at right around, if I'm at max distance, at about 3 seconds, or 2 seconds actually, usually to be safe, I'll cast Frostbolt. I'll go Frostbolt, Frozen Orb, and then cast Icy Veins, and then go into an Ebon Bolt. Now you will waste 1 or 2 procs doing that, but I'm always so just a little bit eccentric about making sure my Ebon Bolt shatters during Frozen Orb, so that's why I do it that way. So here we go. Let's pretend I potioned Frozen Orb, and now I'm going to shatter Ebon Bolt. Now here we go. Getting rid of some procs, and I'm going to be fishing for some other stuff. Oh, Brain Freeze, so get rid of my Fingers of Frost. Comboing with the Frostbolt, Brain Freeze, and Ice Lance. Now here we go. Okay. That's pretty much the gist of the entire opening right there. You just saw it. You're just dumping out all of your stuff and hoping and fishing for procs and to get buffs rolling. Particularly Chain Reaction, and like I have the bracers, so I'm buffing my Ice Lance damage. Just repeating this process. Looking for procs. When you get them, usually get rid of them. If you're like 1 stack of Incanter's Flow and no stacks of Chain Reaction, then hang on to it. But so another Frostbolt, Flurry, Ice Lance. Use my next Ebon Bolt, which I'm going to shatter with Flurry, and then follow it by an Ice Lance. Now we've got Frozen Orb coming back up. As soon as it hits the target, we got ourselves some procs. Okay, so now I'm at 3 procs. Don't want to do that because I'm potentially wasting. So I'm going to go down to 1 proc, get some Frostbolts out. You can kind of see the general idea here. Now this is not, I didn't use Time Warp. I didn't use my trinket, my unused trinket. But this is it. This is how Frost works. Some people find it boring, or like, oh, you're just pressing all the buttons that light up. Well, sometimes that is true, but if you really, really want to just kind of, if you're questing and stuff, Frost is a breeze to play. But if you're really raiding at a high level, and you're really utilizing and abusing these 2 things right here, Chain Reaction and Incanter's Flow, the complexity of the spec goes way high because it's so tempting to press the buttons when they light up, and you're still going to do good damage if you do that, but you can really bump up your total overall damage by being patient. So here we go again. We're back in our cooldown stuff. Frozen Orbs out. Ooh, these are some big hard-hitting Ice Lances right there. And I don't have damage numbers up, as I'm sure you've seen, but with all those cooldowns and things, those are some hard-hitting Ice Lances, I can tell you that. Actually, let's take a look. Some of those Ice Lances, 2.4 mil. That's not bad. And 100% crit chance. That's what you want. You don't want to be casting non-critical striking Ice Lances. That's just massive amounts of wasted damage. So all right, that's Frost Mage. There's obviously a lot of other little things that we could go over, but this video has already by far exceeded the amount of time I was aiming for. But that's just the way it goes. So I hope everybody learned something, including new players, people picking it up as an off-spec or as an alt, and people who have already even been playing it for a while. Maybe you're looking for an answer to some question they have. But anyways, I'll see you guys later, and thanks for watching.